Get ready to enlarge. I want us to look at this passage of scripture, Isaiah 54, verse 2, that says, enlarge the place of your tent. Stretch your tent curtains wide. Do not hold back. Lengthen your cords and strengthen your stakes. I want us to expand in the best way and not the worst way. All right? Let's not get fat from eating too much, but let's get slim from sharing and expanding and growing our influence. It's going to be a great decade. It's going to be a great year. And it's not just because of this church, but I'm prophesying that over your life because you are His church and you are part of that vision that God has imparted into our church. But today I'm really feeling responsible for this passage of enlarge the place of your tent. Who's gone camping before? Everybody been camping, right? I'm not the best camper, but Megan and I went to Montague over January, and we stayed in a chalet while everybody else stayed in tents and caravans. And there were certain reasons for that, but there were some funny things that I observed while we were camping. Camping. In that each sort of, when you go to caravan parks, you get allotted a certain piece of land or a certain piece of property. It's 6 meters by 6 meters, 10 meters by 10 meters, and you kind of hire out that piece of land and you go and settle. And while we were there in our chalet, a few plots down was this old couple. And they had this massive plot, but they had this sweet little two-man tent, and they set everything out neatly, and they were ready, and they were just ready to relax and have a great time, have a bit of rest together, you know. And it was great for the first day until the next day, early in the morning. They were having a hot cup of coffee on a cool summer's morning in Montague, and this Ford Ranger double cab bakkie rolled on in with this massive contraption of a trailer attached to it. And out of no coincidence, or out of pure coincidence, they happened to choose the very plot next to where this little old couple were staying in their little two-man tent. And these guys were sitting there, and to their horror, this thing rolls in, and the bakkie occupies half of the plot of land that's next to them, and then the trailer occupies the second half of the plot of land, just maximizing space completely, like the father or the dad of this family that rolled in had gone to the caravan park before and had managed to measure the exact dimension of the plot to make sure that he could bring everything he can, and it would still all fit into his place. And he rolls on in, and this old couple's watching, and he steps out of the bakkie, and it's like he just moves and he sort of proudly swanders by, and he presses a button, and like this thing transforms in a moment where each side expands into a new function and a new direction, and out of the one side and out of the top, beds kind of come out to occupy his entire family, and then the kitchen comes out of one area, and then the bathrooms come out of the other area, and kind of everything is just maximized. Then just to add a cherry on top, this sort of tent or this covering wraps around this trailer and clips into place on the other end of it. This all happens, and while this all happens, this old couple just kind of looks at this contraption unfolding in absolute awe, but in absolute terror, because they realize that their holiday is over. Because it wasn't just one family that rolled out of this bakkie, but it was like, it's amazing how many people can fit into a Ford Ranger. I'm talking like 2 families with 4 kids rolled out of this thing, and the peace was just disturbed for this old couple. But it's incredible, and how the same piece of land can be occupied in a different way. And that's kind of what I want to chat about today, in that we know that God has allotted us a certain piece of land, a certain territory, a certain sphere of influence, a certain workplace, a certain suburb, a certain city. He's given us an allotment. He's given us a task. He's given us a commission, a mandate to affect influence and change and maximize over a certain area. And I want to talk about this context of enlarging the way that we make room for more, enlarging the way that we dream and we plan for our lives, and enlarging the way that we occupy a space, because this is your space. the city is your space. Your apartment building is your space. Your school is your space. Your university is your space. You get where I'm saying. God's given us a space, a sphere of influence, whether you are in the media industry, whether you are in the education department, whether you are in government, whether you are in religion, whether you are in arts and entertainment. He's given you a place of influence that we are meant to maximize for His kingdom, right? God's saying there's more. God's saying it's time to get dirty. It's time to assert the authority that He's given you, that He's commissioned you with, to go out with. It's time to change your expectation of what you are capable of because of what God is doing through you. It's time to dream bigger. It's time to plan more. It's time to make drawings and be creative about how we step into the promise of God's kingdom. But in order to understand what this passage is really talking about, we've got to understand the context of what this tent means, what this tent is describing, what God is emphasizing through talking about your tent. He's talking about your reach. How far does your influence extend? How far does your reputation extend? How far does your integrity extend? How far does your generosity extend? How far does your patience extend? How far does your forgiveness extend? How far does your grace extend? How far does your wisdom and your discernment extend? How far does the authority that God has given you extend? But sometimes our biggest obstacle in seeing this is that the area that we are meant to be enlarging is sometimes determined by the wrong tent. I want to ask you this today. Whose tent are you carrying? Whose tent are you carrying? Because if a tent means your influence, and if a tent means your reach, and if a tent means your authority, then it's not necessarily about your authority, but it's about the calling of God on your life that's given you an authority. It's not necessarily about your significance, but it's more about His significance in His kingdom. It's not necessarily about your dreams, but it's about His dreams for you and your life. Because we all started off with dreams, didn't we? As we progress through school, as we were kids, and that first question comes to you when you're like 4 years old, where the teacher says, Brucey, what do you want to be when you grow up? And, your limited knowledge of what is available, you kind of say, well, I want to be a pilot, or I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a policeman. We all kind of have these dreams as we go up, and those dreams kind of evolve. I know I had dreams. I know when I was 12 years old, I'd made a decision to pursue a dream of mine. And in that dream was my whole project plan for my life. I kind of had it all timelined and set out that by matric or by grade 10 when I decided on my subjects, I decided them based on what I felt like I was going to do when I finished matric. And therefore, I didn't really focus on academics because I felt like I was going to be a professional sportsman. Sorry, Mom and Dad, that report didn't look great. But then those plans began to change, and so my dreams began to change, because at some point in my life, I encountered God for the first time, really, for real, for my life. It wasn't through my mom, it wasn't through my dad, it wasn't through my teacher at school, but God encountered me. God appeared to me, and He presented Jesus to me, and my life all of a sudden changed because my dreams weren't mine. I surrendered those to Jesus. My expectations weren't mine because I kind of surrendered those to Jesus. I said, Jesus, you've got to take the wheels in this, because I had one significant revelation in that His dreams are my dreams because He dreamed about me in the first place. He imagined me before my parents even conceived me. He imagined me before my parents even dreamed about a third child. He imagined me and knew my name and knew my character, knew my personality, knew my body type, knew my blood type, knew how my teeth were going to be disformed, knew that I was going to be 6'5", knew that I was going to be a heavy, burly guy and I was going to struggle with buying pants for the rest of my life. He knew all of those things about me. But the thing that really began to change in my heart is that when I had these dreams, I wanted to be significant according to the opinion that I had about what significance meant. And significance for me wasn't about anybody else but me. It was about my dreams and my house and my car and my possessions and my wealth. But when I encountered God, that significance or that opinion about significance began to change. And it began to be dreaming about how I can be significant to others, how I can share with others, how I can impart knowledge with others, how I can walk a journey with others, how I can disciple others, how I can take people on a road to encountering Christ. And all of a sudden, the words that I began to speak over my life became different. My perspective became enlarged. I began to speak things like Ephesians 3:20, where it says, now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all I can ask or imagine according to His power that is work within me. I began to speak Jeremiah 29:11 over my life. And that says, for I know the plans I have for you. He knows the plans that He has for your life. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you life and hope and abundance. I began to speak Romans 8 verse 37 that says, no, in all these things we are more than conquerors through Him who loved us. Your dreams were His dreams because He dreamed about you before you were comprehended. I've got to wonder today if sometimes your dreams are limited because you're carrying the wrong tent. I've got to wonder if your perspective is a bit limited because you're carrying the wrong tent. I've got to wonder if your expectations for your life and your impact are shrunk because you've got the wrong tent. I wonder if you're having anxiety and stress because you're carrying the wrong tent. I wonder if the plans for your life are a bit smaller because your tent is starting to poke you. It's becoming a bit uncomfortable. I wonder if because of the tent being yours, you aren't necessarily stepping out in faith. You aren't stepping out in courage. You might necessarily not be as brave as you want to be because that tent is a burden. I wonder if you aren't sleeping well at night because that tent is too small. Who's ever slept on a bed that is too small for you? My whole life. My parents bought my brother and I a bunk bed. I don't think with any comprehension that I would be 6'5" by the time I was 18 years old because that bunk bed was meant for a 6-foot person. I learned very well how to sleep in the fetal position on my side. But my dad, through his creativity, created an extension on the bunk bed for me. Anyway, I sleep on a bigger bed. Sometimes our dreams and our perspectives and our expectations are small because we're carrying the wrong tent. We don't think we can influence. We don't think we have the right words. We don't think that we have a correct perspective. We might not be able to talk to our superior at work because he might seem smarter than us, but we forget that the tent that we're carrying isn't our intelligence, but it's our God's wisdom. I've got to believe that when we're encountering a parent and talking to them about life, yes, you might not have been a parent for longer, but God's been your father forever. I've got to ask and beg to ask the question, whose tent are you carrying? Because when you change your tent, I've got to tell you this right now. I've got a buy one, get one free option. I've got a trade-in with no increase option for you. This isn't an option like when you trade in your car and the next one that you get is more expensive because you've got to keep on paying. No, this isn't one of those moments. This is a moment where you can trade in your tent and you can get a better one for free. You can trade in your tent and you can get a bigger one for free. There's no fine, there's no fine print. There is no deposit needed. There is no rebate or financing that's coming your way. This is a free gift to you. God is waiting for you to trade in your tent. He's waiting for you to trade in your influence. He's waiting for you to trade in your dreams so that He can give you the newest upgrade coming your way tomorrow. Because He realizes this is the one condition about your tent. Your tent is going to be bigger because it's meant for more than just you. It's meant to draw people in. It's meant to be open and wide. It's meant to be high for the tall guys, but low enough for the short guys. It's meant to have enough poles so that you can go right to the edges, that you can squeeze as many people in, because it is about God's significance in your life, and it's about you bringing people into your tent because God has placed influence in your life, because God has placed authority in your life, because God has placed His dreams in your life. He's given you an upgrade, not for just you, but for your apartment building, for your school, for your kids' school, for your university, for your workplace, for your church place. He's given you a bigger gift, a bigger mandate, a bigger dream, a bigger commission, because it's not just about your significance, but it's about Him being significant through you. The next thing I want to talk to you about is this. Don't forget about your covering. See, this is the thing, in that we receive the tent and we work really hard to fill the tent. We work really hard. We hustle because that's what we do nowadays. You probably hustle harder when you go to Joburg because everything's bigger in Joburg, but Cape Town's pretty big. You begin to work harder, and so you get tired. And the reason why we get tired is because sometimes we haven't got the right covering. Who's ever walked through a field of devil thorns before? Yeah, it hurts, right? Those devil thorns have a way. It's like they have an intelligence about them. They hit you in the softest part of your foot every single time. And every single time they draw blood. And I've got to tell you, I'm not light. So when I step heavy. So those devil thorns go deep. And my feet aren't that hard anymore because I wear shoes all the time. So it goes right through the soft skin really quickly. But it kind of, when you live without a covering, it's kind of like you're walking through a bush of devil thorns where you're not quite secure about where your feet are getting planted. So you've got to walk slowly, and you've got to be a bit cautious. And sometimes you hit and you feel the poke and then you pull away. You aren't secure about your foundation. But this is the thing about a covering. When you have a covering for a tent, a floor covering, that floor covering is meant to create a comfort base. It's meant to create a security that either you can walk anywhere, you can lie anywhere, you can sit anywhere. There won't be an animal that will bite you. There won't be a stick that will poke you. There won't be a thorn that will prick you. You can be in comfort on top of that covering. You can be in comfort lying down and resting and not stressing and not having anxiety on that covering. And we Christians, we people who believe in Jesus, we people who trust in Jesus and have faith in what He did, we have a covering. And the covering is this. Philippians 4 verse 6 to 7. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. See, there's this weird thing that happens nowadays in that people don't feel comfortable to pray before you drive. People don't feel comfortable to pray before you go on holiday. People don't feel comfortable to pray before you go into an executive meeting. People don't feel comfortable to pray before you buy a house. People don't feel comfortable before you conceive a child. We generally leave prayer out of a lot of things in our life, but imagine if we had to start stepping into our life with the covering. Imagine if we had to start being a bit more braver and believing for God's expectation and His enlarged dreams, because we have a covering. Our steps will be bigger, our belief will be stronger, our faith for miracles and breakthrough will be greater, because we aren't stepping in our own authority and our own influence and with our own tents on our back, but we're stepping forward with His. See, there is a covering that gives us peace, but that covering is not just meant for you, but it's meant for the person next to you and the person next to you and the person next to you, because we're meant to draw people into the tent of Christ. We're meant to draw people into the kingdom of Christ, not so that they can walk around in insecurity, but they can walk around in comfort. They can walk around stress-free. They can lie down and get some rest, because your prayers aren't just for you. Your prayers are for the person that you encounter on the street. Your prayers are for the person, your neighbor that lives next to you in your apartment. Your prayers are for their children. Your prayers are for the friends of your kids at schools. Your prayers are for the community that is around you. Your prayers could be for the local shop owner. Your prayers could be for your senior officer at your work. Your prayers could be for your managers. Your prayers could be for your colleagues. Your prayers could be for your business, because God has placed you in a sphere of influence. He's placed you in a place of authority so that you don't just carry the burden for yourself, but you promise, or you pray for the promise of the people that you encounter. Because we're meant to live an enlarged life. We're meant to have an enlarged place for our tent, so that when we're carrying our tent, we're not carrying our tent, but we're actually walking with God's tent, ready to pray His authority and His influence and His significance wherever we place our feet. But this is the other thing that I want to step into today. Because we talk about our tent, but we also talk about our spheres of influence, and we talk about our oikos. Who is our oikos? Our oikos is the people that we encounter on a daily basis, the people that we regularly have contact with, the people that we regularly have conversations with, the people that we walk with, the people that we work with, the people that we attend courses with, the people that we go to school with, our oikos. And the Bible is very clear about this. It says that when you're gathering your tent, when you're praying for your covering, never walk alone. We're not meant to walk alone. We were never designed to walk alone. We were meant to walk in community. We were meant to walk in collaboration and in partnership with people, supporting each other, encouraging each other, affirming each other, crying with each other, praying for each other. We were meant to work in fellowship and collaboration with each other, so therefore we never walk alone. Why should it be a football team that gets it right, yet we can't? They must be doing something right, because they're 22 points ahead of Manchester City. Thank you, Jesus. Man United's still in 6th place, but let's not remember that right now. We never walk alone. See, it's not an original thought. It's not some new theory. Jesus never walked alone. Elisha didn't walk alone. Elijah never walked alone. There were always people that were with them. There was always a disciple, or there was always an apprentice. Paul, in his missions across Europe, never walked alone. He always had an entourage with him. We don't walk alone. It's not new. It's old. It works. It's reliable. And this is part of what I want to get into. Luke 10, verse 1 to 4. And moving forward from that says this: After this, the Lord appointed 72 others and sent them 2 by 2 ahead of him. How often do we wait for God to walk ahead of us first? Yet He's given the authority to work, for us to walk ahead of Him. We just need to pray for His covering. 2 by 2 ahead of Him to every town and place where He was about to go. He told them, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into the harvest field. Go, I am sending you. He says, go, I'm sending you. Do I need to bring this into a focus? It's not that He just sent me. He sent you and 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 you. When it comes to sending you, it's not that He chooses one person, that's a special person. He chooses every single person, and He sends you. I want to tell you today that you have been chosen. You have been appointed. You have been selected from a shortlist. You are the person that He has chosen for your job, for His job that He dreamed about you. He has chosen you. He has given the gifts to you. He has given the authority to you. He has given the discernment and the wisdom to you, because He sent you. Go, I am sending you out like lambs amongst the wolves. Who just got scared at that moment? Because we know that when He sends us, it doesn't mean that it's going to be cushy. You are going to step on a few devil thorns, right? You are going to get disappointed. You are going to get rejected, because even in the context of the scripture, Jesus says, I'm sending you out amongst the wolves. You are going to be rejected, but this is how you answer. I'm preparing you beforehand because you are going to have hardships, but it's okay. You will come out the other side. Pastor Des has some incredible moments sometimes that put the fear of God in me, and sometimes that same fear when Megan's about to pick me out. She has these moments where she comes to work, or we were having lunch at the Liebenbergs, and she says, I had a dream last night. And I'm like, oh boy. And she says, God told me something. He said, you're going to have a hard time. It's going to be difficult. And I'm like, God, isn't it difficult enough already? Don't I have enough stress already? Don't I have enough worries already? My bank account on the 5th is empty. This is hard enough as it is, and you're telling me it's going to be more difficult? How much harder can it be? But she always follows on with this something, because Des has got this prophetic thing in her, and she says it's going to be harder, but God is saying you will not be burnt. You will not drown. You will not be hurt. You will come out rejoicing. And I believe that every single time, because when God gives us a tent to carry and He gives us the covering that we need, that covering is there to stop the devil thorns. The covering is there to stop the snakes. The covering is there to stop the discomfort. It's going to be hard, but it's going to be okay, because you will still be able to rest. Because you will still be able to sleep. And let me get you ready for this, because the next passage of Scripture says this. The 72 returned with joy. They returned with joy. After Jesus said, I'm sending you out amongst the wolves. I'm sending you out to be rejected. Don't take anything with you. This is going to be hard. They came back rejoicing. They came back dancing. They came back shouting. They came back screaming. They came back clapping their hands. And even amidst the rejection, they came back. I want to tell you, it's going to be hard. These commission and these mandates that God gives you, these tents that you're going to carry. Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. That tent of yours is light. It's going to be hard, but you're going to come back singing sweeter. You're going to come back shouting louder. You're going to come back screaming harder. You're going to come back braver than you ever have been. You're going to come back clapping louder. And you won't come back thinking, I'm done, I'm good, that was enough. I guarantee you will come back saying, God, I want more. God, I got rejected 90% of the time, but the 10% where someone gave their life to Jesus, God, that is enough, because I saw their life changed. God, that 10% where I saw hope returning to someone's eyes, God, that is enough amidst the pain and the persecution, because God, another life got saved. God, that 10% is enough when I saw someone's wealth return, when I saw someone's health return, because amidst the rejection, God, one person's salvation is enough. And can I tell you something? God came back, and when He saw you rejoicing, He was already dancing, because He already knew what happened. The 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in your name. And He replied, I saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven. I have given you the authority. I've given you the authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy. Nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the Spirit submits you, but rejoice that your names are written in heaven. And in that time, Jesus, full of joy through the Holy Spirit, said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Hey, little children, how's it going? Isn't it great to have faith beyond your logic? Isn't it great to have faith beyond your rationale? Isn't it great to have faith beyond your methodology? Isn't it great to have faith beyond your expectations? Isn't it great to have faith more than you've ever dreamed? Isn't it great to be able to step out and know that God is dreaming bigger than you ever have? Because, hey, children, we're meant to have an imagination. Hey, children, we're meant to have dreams. Hey, children, we're meant to have greater expectations. Yes, Father, for this is what you are pleased to do. This isn't hard for God. God celebrates with you. He wants to see you excel. He wants to see you take the authority that He's given you, the influence that He's given you in your sphere of influence, in your oikos, and He loves to see you do something with it. He loves to see you experiment with it. He loves to see you take risks with it in the midst of the potential return that you will get. He loves to see you increase your expectation. He loves to see you enlarge your territory and maximize on the space that He's given you, because when you do that, He gives you more. He's ready to give you more. He's ready to be generous with the mandates and the purposes over your life, because He chose you to be Christ's representatives in His kingdom. He chose you to be priests and pastors and shepherds and advocates and representatives in His kingdom, amongst society, amongst the earth, amongst the governments and the schools and the religions. He's chosen you. Can I tell you why they came back rejoicing? They came back rejoicing because of what's said in Revelations 12 verse 11, where it says, they triumphed over Him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. Band, you guys can come up. Triumph comes and breakthrough comes when testimonies are shared. Why is it that when we get saved, we go out and tell people about it? Yet when we grow up, we're more conservative. No, I've got to believe that God's influence is carried when testimonies are given. People can't dispute where God has broken through in your testimony. People can't argue with you about when God has provided in your bank account in the midst of the hardships that you're going. People can't argue when food is dropped off at your front door. People can't argue when business deals come through when you weren't even ready for them. People can't argue with your testimony. But can I tell you, the testimony comes when you enlarge your tent. Your testimony comes when you provide a covering for not just you, but for the people that you are encountering. The testimony comes when you never walk alone, when you walk side by side with someone, when you take someone on a journey, when you disciple someone, when you invite someone to church and you see them give their life to Jesus. Testimony comes when you enlarge your tent. I've got to tell you this. You can only enlarge your tent if you're brave enough to believe, if you're brave enough to trust, if you're brave enough to believe those promises and speak those promises over your life. You can only enlarge and invite people in when you believe in what Jesus did for you for the very first time. God is waiting for you to enlarge your tent. He's waiting for you to upgrade. He's waiting for you to get your buy one, get one free. He's waiting for you to take more territory for His kingdom. He's waiting for you to dream bigger dreams. He's waiting for you to believe that you're smarter than what you think you are. He's waiting for you to believe and ask Him to give you wisdom and strength and discernment. He's waiting for you to step out and trust.